Did everything.
Okay, good.
Yay! Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of PS Make Me Famous. I'm here with Emma Landis, and she's an art specialist and consultant out of Toronto, Ontario. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. So let's start from the beginning because I'm always interested to see how people fall into their career of choice. And especially the icing on the top of the cake is that it's an absolute passion of yours. So when did you realize you're interested in art?
That's a great question. So I first showed interest in art when I was really young. I was just really passionate about doing art myself. And I grew up in Kingston. And so there's a really fabulous museum in Kingston that's affiliated with Queen's University, and it's called the Agnes Etherington Art Center. So my dad in particular would take me there, and little known fact is they actually have Rembrandts in this small museum. So I was exposed to some really amazing world-class art in little Kingston, Ontario. So from there, I knew that I was really passionate about it. And then I actually developed other interests, of course, as you do growing up. And I went into university thinking I would do global development studies and French, and I had a very clear path of what I wanted to do. And I did not take art history in first year because my mom had suggested it and I was in a phase.
Oh, parents.
Yeah. And then, of course, the next year I realized that art history was the path for me. I took a few courses and I had to do a little catch up, but it was amazing to finally bring that lifelong passion of mine together.
Do you remember that first piece of art other than a Rembrandt that you saw that you're like, whoa, that's really good?
Oh, the first piece of art, I'm not sure. I just remember the feeling of being in the museum and the atmosphere. It was so otherworldly.
Yeah.
And even though it was kind of uncomfortable in some ways, in other ways, I knew it was a place I wanted to explore.
That's amazing. Okay, so when did you start pursuing a career in art?
Well, so after I finished my BA, I moved to Toronto without a job, knowing that I would need to figure out my place within the industry. So I graduated from Queen's with a BA. I didn't do the 4-year degree, I did 3 years. Um, and then I came to Toronto just to test the waters and see what kind of career opportunities there were. So I worked in galleries, I volunteered at the Art Gallery of Ontario. I worked at an interior design firm. I, explored all these different avenues. And then I went back to school to do my master's degree. And from there, things kind of took off.
So where is your ultimate happy place? Because I see you also worked in live auction land, which is so fascinating to me.
Yes.
That feels like the stock market for art. It's so intense. And next time you go and I'm in town and the world is open, can I enjoy a live auction experience with you, please?
Absolutely. I love auctions. So auctions are so fun. I um, got my first job in auctions in London, Ontario at an estate auction house called Gardner. And they were so wonderful to me. And that really gave me the leg up to get a position at an art auction house in Toronto. So that was my first um, big job in Toronto where I was actually doing my master's at the same time. So this is the time when I really grew my first couple gray hairs because it was so busy, but it was so much fun. And you have in the auction world 2 really busy seasons in the spring and fall. And I joined right when things were crazy in the spring. And yeah, I loved it. I worked there and I worked at another auction house called Buy Dealers in Montreal.
Wow. And we should say that your company is called Richan Art,
Mm-hmm.
Richan Art. And basically what you do is help people curate an art collection.
Mm-hmm. So I, oh,
No, you're
sorry, I'm
good.
getting a call.
Guys, we're in a Zoom meeting, so it's okay.
Okay,
No, this happens. Actually, you're the first, but I'm open to it.
Oh no.
No, it's the best. I love it. It's so good. Is it an important
Uh,
client? Because if you need to
no,
pause, okay.
it's actually a friend of mine who just had a baby, so I think she's just calling
So
to chat because it's, you know, what it's like having a new
yeah.
baby.
Oh yeah. It's
Um, are you, you can edit this, right?
Sometimes I leave it. Sometimes I edit
Okay, okay.
it. Don't stress. It's all good.
I'm trying to figure out how to get back into.
Oh, Zoomland.
Okay, well, I can see myself.
So let's go back to how you curate an art
Oh
collection
yeah,
for a client, because that's so interesting. What do you look
yeah.
for? What do you look for? Do you like sit down with the client, say like what do they naturally gravitate to, or do they come in and ask you like for something that's going to have longevity that they can eventually sell? Like how where do you that's a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, so it totally depends on the collector and whether they're starting out and they need help with their very first art piece, which I do help clients do that and navigate things from the very beginning. And that can be really fun to see how they develop as collectors, and we really go through the process from start to finish together. And for those collectors, I really help them to train their eye. And so that really just means exposing them to as much artwork as possible. I can go with them to art fairs, to art galleries. I send them pictures of artwork that I think might be of interest to them. And it's really about an open dialogue and just seeing as much as you can. And then for the collectors who have more established collections already, some of them have been collecting for 20 years. So they already have a basic understanding of their tastes and their interests. And for me, it's more of helping them round out their collection or moving things around their home or sometimes multiple homes. And it may be there, for example, well, commonly they don't have as much time, but maybe they're used to negotiating with the same dealers or auction houses, and they need someone to come and freshen up their collection. So
Interesting.
that's where I would come in.
Do you find most people kind of stick with the same artist when they're doing a collection, or is it more based on colors or themes like modern versus more traditional?
A lot of the times people come with an idea in mind of whether they like modern or traditional, not necessarily artists' names if they're a newer collector, but they'll have in mind, okay, I know my house is like this or my office space is designed like that. And they often think they know what they want, and sometimes they do have a very clear idea, but I can show them that the art doesn't necessarily have to match the couch kind of thing. We can, you know, be creative about how we integrate art into the space.
That's amazing. How objective is sourcing out art?
I mean, art is it's a subjective landscape.
Right.
So I want them to love the work, of course. I'm not there to dictate what they should be collecting, but I'm there to help them make informed decisions and educated decisions so that they can feel confident buying something and spending that money on a piece that they can live with long term, or in some cases, they have an idea that they would like to sell it eventually. But yeah, I mean, it's not usually a case of flipping the work, for example. They still need to love it.
Right. And what's like for these artists who come in that become a piece that you kind of look out for, do they usually come from an art background that they studied art in some capacity, or have you seen some really amazing pieces that end up in collections that have longevity that artist just came kind of poof without a degree in art?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that a lot of artists do have formal education in art, and that can help people, especially collectors who are not as comfortable collecting yet. So they'll say, okay, I know this person has a degree. So it just gives them a little bit of reassurance that they're buying artwork by an artist who knows what they're doing, so to speak. However, that's certainly not a requirement. There are artists who are self-taught and they do very well. And you know also in 20th century history in particular, modern artists were renowned for enrolling in schools and then dropping out after a
Mhm.
few months because they didn't like the way that art was being taught. And though many of those artists have gone on to be extremely successful as
Can you
well.
name a few that haven't had a degree that I should look out for? I'm just curious.
Mm, it was more common in the 20th century for artists um, to drop out of school.
Right.
But sometimes too, they would drop out and then they would come back later in life because a lot of artists end up teaching at university or in at other institutions
Mhm.
so that they can support themselves if their artwork isn't able to do that for them, which is very common even amongst more successful artists.
Let's go into the world of working with developers. So how do you work with developers, and why would a developer seek out working with you?
Um, with developers, it can be quite a different story than working with an individual client, particularly in the case of public art, because in that scenario, there are a lot more people involved in the decision-making process than just the individual buying for their home. So with a developer, for example, with public art, we're also working closely with the city to make sure that this is artwork that would satisfy a larger public and that would be accessible physically to the broader public as well. Uh, and so a developer might reach out to me, for example, if they need help navigating that. It does take a lot of time to deal with the city, and these projects can be up to 5 years long. So it does take time, and you need special expertise in helping the artist fabricate it, install it, ship it. All of these factors on these large scale artworks can be complicated and time consuming. But for a work of public art, a developer might want that in front of their condo development to attract residents to live there, or just to make the space around the condo a place to convene and socialize. A lot of these developments have coffee shops and other retail spaces. So to make the development a destination, really, that's what this public art can really do to enhance the development site.
That's really interesting. Are there any other perks for a developer to put such an amount of money in for them as a developer? Like, why else would they want a piece of public art?
Sure. So in Toronto, there's something called Section 37 with the city. If the
Oh,
develop,
Section 37.
yeah,
I've heard of this. No, just joking.
yeah. So if the developer, for example, wants to build their building higher than what is typically allowed for that zoning area, then the city will allow them to do so if they spend 1% of their total construction costs on a community benefit. So one of the benefits that's allowed or considered is public art. That's public art would be, benefiting the broader community um, as something that people could engage with, um, spend time around, contemplate. So yeah, that is one of the benefits. Basically, is they could. Sorry, my cat just
Oh,
entered the
I'm like, is
picture.
that a dog? Or come on in, baby. Come
Yeah.
on in, honey. And
So
we're not a cat on Zoom. Did you see that clip with the lawyer who
no.
was like, what? You didn't see that clip where the lawyer shows up on a Zoom call and he looks like a cat? He had a cat filter?
Oh yeah, the filter. Yeah,
Yes. Oh my
that's
God, that
right.
made me so happy. That brought me such joy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I mean, so basically the two main benefits to doing public art for a developer
Uh-huh.
is to potentially build higher than is normally allowed for that area, and also to create a destination out of your development by having maybe a star artist um, installed there.
I love that. That's so interesting. Okay, so what are 2 or 3 artists that we should look out for 2021 that are like, you're like, you've got to check these guys out? Like, add them on Insta.
Mm, I really like the work of Dominique Fung right now.
Okay.
I've been watching her for a few years, and there was a while I was like, I should really buy one of her paintings. And then it just, in the last few years, it's just gone up and up and up. And she's based in New York, but from Canada originally. And she has this show, I forget the gallery that it's at now, but it's coming up. You can find her work on Instagram. It's really interesting. So definitely check her out. Who else? I would say Jana Watson is doing some really interesting new work since the pandemic started.
Mhm.
She has historically done paintings, but she's doing these rugs right now as well. And so she has a solo exhibition coming up at Bougie Gallery, where she showcases both her paintings and her rug work.
Wow. I love that. Okay, so what's your favorite art book?
Book. You know what? I have so many art books. This is just the tip of my bookshelf. But I went through this phase where I loved art crime. So I have probably an entire shelf on my bookcase dedicated to art crime books. So those are really fun. And this isn't a book, but for people interested in art crime,
Uh-huh.
there's a new documentary on, I think it's on Amazon Prime,
Mhm.
called This Is a Robbery. And it's about,
Yes.
have you seen it?
I just started watching it. It was so interesting.
It's really good, and they put it out because they're coming up on a big anniversary for the crime at the art heist at the Gardner Museum in Boston.
That's right.
And I have a
They
couple
still
of
don't know,
books.
they still don't know who did it.
They have no idea still. It's crazy. It's really uh, it's a really an elaborate story and really interesting, and everyone has different theories
So
about who did
people
it.
who would steal an art piece of such value, because you can never really re-auction it off, right? It's like it goes back to the museum. Is it just for that person just to enjoy on their, like, keep it in their little basement dungeon and then like come over and see it? Like, what would it be the reason? Because most people would think it's for resale.
Yeah, well, one of the theories in this documentary, I don't want to spoil it,
Yeah.
but one of the theories is that the stolen art is used as a bartering tool when these criminals are trying to get out of prison time. They also use it as sort of a currency in the black market, so just amongst other criminals, basically. Because you're right, in the open market, it would be recognized.
Mhm.
Some criminals, for maybe less known works, you can cut the painting up. I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
you could cut it up and then it would be less recognizable.
Mhm.
But depending on the age and the fragility of the painting, by cutting it, you could do serious damage and then not be
That's
able to use the piece that you were trying to, the smaller piece that you were trying to sell.
interesting. Holy, there is a whole black market I don't know about. Can we talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
the snakes behind you, the painting? Who's the artist behind you?
Oh, yeah. So this is Dana Slyboom. She's
Mhm.
a Dutch Canadian artist, and I really love her work. Let's see if I can do it up there. So her work is really striking in a graphic way. This is a print. I got it at a place called Ninth Editions. And what I love about her work is that it's kind of humorous and immediately visually arresting. But then when you look at it a bit closer, there's something deeper going on there. So this work is called, or it's part of a series called Oil Spill Swan. So of course it touches on the climate change crisis. But when you're looking at it initially, it's just this really striking, beautiful piece. So that's one of my favorite types of work, is when you look at it and you're immediately drawn to it visually, but then you have to do that second take to think about what the work is really saying.
That is so interesting. I cannot wait to like go around with you and look at people's art and or go to the museum with you and you could tell me about everything. So I'm like, speaking of museums, what do you think the future is for museums?
That's a great question, because it really is up in the air right now for multiple reasons. One of them naturally is COVID. Um, they've been closed for so long, and a lot of museums are struggling financially to keep the lights on and keep their employees, you know, on staff. So a lot of museums are being forced to sell off parts of their collection.
Mm.
And everyone has an opinion on what should be sold and what should stay and whether anything should be sold at all, because many people donate to the museum um, with the belief that it would, or the agreement that that artwork would never be sold.
Mhm.
But a lot of artwork is in storage, so that's, you know, they just don't have enough space to showcase everything.
Mhm.
So those are the works that many museums are trying to sell off. Now, the world is also becoming much more aware of the lack of diversity represented in a lot of Western institutions in particular. So, yeah, people are questioning whether these are really the right spaces for the public, whether they really are for the public if they're only representing certain populations.
Mhm.
So it's really up in the air what's going to happen to museums in the future, whether we'll have less museums or whether new spaces will pop up where people will want to spend their time engaging with artwork
Do you think
and
this
be
gives,
interested. Yeah.
yeah, do you think this gives a boost to the public art world?
What in
Oh,
particular?
like just because like if you're thinking about museums where they're more confined with more people, is this like a more easier sell for people to do more public art because it's outdoors?
Yeah, I'm definitely. So a lot of people during the pandemic, of course, they can't go inside anywhere. So they're wandering around their neighborhoods, going for walks, spending more time outside, and really realizing that the public art landscape could be greater than it is currently, and really appreciating what we do have outside right now.
And what are your three favorite public art hotspots in Toronto?
Oh,
Sorry.
that's a good. Let's see. I In the financial district, there's a lot of artworks by Sorel Etrog. He's a 20th century sculptor, Canadian sculptor. So there's some interesting works there, and that's a little more historical. There um, is some public art by Michael Snow in the Eaton Center. Actually, a lot of people don't realize if they're just visiting from out of town. There's a series of Canadian geese in the Eaton Center. So you can go see some public art and do some shopping if you see that.
That's so great. Was there a third?
Let's see what else. There's some interesting works by Shane Dark, developments as well, very colorful. And I'm really excited also about the artists that we have recently commissioned for the development that I'm working on downtown near OCAD University and the Art Gallery of Ontario. But I can't say who it is yet until the developer finally announces
I
it.
feel the excitement. Okay,
Yeah.
so where do you like what's the dream? What's the dream? Where do you see yourself in 10, 20 years? What's the dream?
The dream. I could go in so many directions. I would really love to continue developing the public art side of my business. I have some individual collectors who I love, and we have dinner together. I mean, when it's not COVID, obviously. So I would love to maintain those relationships, but really push forward in the public art sphere. I think that's really the future of art in many ways.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And again, if people want to reach out to you to help curate their amazing art collection or advice or anything, contractors out, not developers out there that need to get into the world of public art, contact Emma at Richan Art. And yeah, thank you again for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Lots of love. Bye.
Bye.